Thank you for taking the time to be here. In a world that moves fast, where attention is pulled in 100 directions and silence feels rare, choosing to pause and listen is not a small thing. It's an act of sincerity. It's the start of something meaningful. Today, we're going to talk about something that cuts to the very heart of what it means to be human. It's a question that sounds simple at first, even poetic. If there's no self, then who is born? Who dies? But beneath those words is a deep mystery, one that touches every part of life. We may not ask it out loud every day, but it lives quietly in us, in our fear of losing someone, in our search for identity, in the way we cling to success or struggle with change. Sometimes without realizing it, we are always asking, who am I? What really matters? What is truly mine? The Buddha gave us a surprising answer. He didn't say, you are this or you are that. Instead, he turned the mirror gently toward us and asked, look again. Is there really something there you can hold on to? Something unchanging, permanent, truly yours? At first, this teaching can feel unsettling. The idea that there's no fixed I behind our experiences, no permanent soul directing our story, can sound like a loss. But what if it's not a loss at all? What if it's a doorway? The teaching of no self, or Anatta, is not about erasing life. It's about revealing how life actually works, moment by moment, breath by breath, in motion, in change, in connection. It's about freeing ourselves from the heavy burden of having to hold everything together, defend who we think we are, and fear what might be taken from us. Because if there is no solid, permanent self, then we don't have to be afraid of losing it. If what we call I is a flow of conditions, then maybe we can meet that flow with less resistance, more understanding, more peace. So in our time together, we're going to take a closer look, not with judgment, not with dogma, but with curiosity. We'll ask, what is this self we think we are? What is really born when a life begins? What truly ends when someone dies? And how should we live if none of it can truly be owned? This isn't just a philosophy to admire. It's a living truth to be seen, known, and lived. And when we begin to see it, something quiet and powerful begins to shift. Not in the sky, not in the scriptures, but right here, in the way we hold our thoughts, our relationships, our lives. So let's begin, not by reaching for more answers, but by softening into the questions. Let's see where they take us. Section 1, what no self really means. Let's start at the beginning, with something many people find confusing. The idea that there is no permanent self. Now, I know that can sound strange. Most of us grew up believing that there's an I inside, a solid me that has been here all along. It feels like there's someone behind our eyes, someone steering the wheel, someone who owns our thoughts, feelings, and memories. We say things like my body, my mind, or my emotions, as if there's a little owner inside holding it all together. But the Buddha asked us to look again. He didn't say we don't exist. And he certainly didn't say life is meaningless. What he said is that this sense of a permanent, unchanging self, this I that we cling to, is not what we think it is. Let me give you an example. Imagine a cart, a wooden cart. If you take away the wheels, is it still a cart? If you take off the handle, is it still a cart? If you remove the wooden boards one by one, what's left? Eventually, all the parts are gone, and yet no single part was the cart. The cart was only a name we gave to a group of parts working together. In the same way, what we call a self is just a collection of parts. The body, the feelings, the thoughts, the memories, the habits, and our awareness. In Buddhism, these parts are called the Five Aggregates. Maybe you've heard that name before. They're like ingredients in a recipe. You have form, that's your body. Then you have feelings, like happiness, sadness, or pain. Next are perceptions, how we recognize things. Then come mental formations, like habits, intentions, memories, and finally consciousness, our awareness of what's happening. Now, here's the key point. All five of these are always changing. Just think about it. Your body has changed since you were a child. Your thoughts change. Your emotions rise and fall. Even your awareness, sometimes it's sharp, sometimes it's foggy. None of these things stay the same, and none of them by themselves are you at their own. But together for a little while, they come together and create the experience of a person, just like the cart. So when the Buddha said there is no self, he wasn't saying there's nothing. He was saying that what we think of as I is more like a process than a person, more like a flame than a stone. It's alive, it's real, but it's not something solid or unchanging. And why does this matter? Because when we believe in a solid self, we start to cling. We want to protect it. We worry about losing it. We get angry when others threaten it. We suffer because we're trying to hold on to something that can't stay. But when we start to see clearly, we can loosen our grip. We don't have to hold life so tightly. We don't have to be afraid every time something changes. We can live more gently because we're no longer trying to hold together something that was never solid in the first place. And that, my friends, is the beginning of real freedom. Let's keep going and look more deeply into this. If there's no fixed self, then what is it that's actually born into this world? We'll explore that in the next part. Section 2, if there's no self, what is born? Now that we've seen the idea of no self, that this I we often cling to is not something fixed or permanent, another question naturally comes up. If there is no solid self, then what exactly is born when a person comes into the world? This is an important question, and it touches something deep in all of us. Because when we look at a newborn baby, whether it's our own child, a grandchild, or a neighbor's, we don't just see a body. We feel like there's a soul, a spirit, something special that has come into the world, something personal. And for many people, there's a quiet belief, even if they don't say it out loud, that this someone has arrived and will carry their identity from this life to the next, like a little self that jumps from one body to another, keeping its story intact. But the Buddha taught something very different. He said birth doesn't require a soul to come in. What we call birth is simply the moment when conditions come together. It's not about someone arriving, it's about patterns forming. Let me explain it with something simple. Imagine lighting one candle with another. The second candle catches fire. There's a flame now, but is it the same flame as the first? No. Is it completely different? Also no. It's a continuation, so one spark gave rise to the next, but there was no little flame that jumped over. This is how the Buddha described birth. It's not a self that moves from one life to the next. It's a process, like a pattern continuing, like a river flowing. And what flows? Karma. Now, karma doesn't mean punishment or reward. It means action. More specifically, intentional action. The things we think, say, and do, these create momentum, like pushing a wheel that keeps turning or wind shaping the waves on the sea. When a new life begins, it's not someone arriving. It's the result of past actions meeting present conditions. It's not a soul owning a new body. It's energy taking shape, based on causes, based on karma. So when we look at a newborn, yes, it's a beautiful, sacred moment, but not because a soul has landed. It's sacred because it shows us how life flows forward, how every moment carries the results of the moments before. And this way of seeing can bring peace. We don't have to figure out who the baby used to be or where the soul came from. We can simply see that birth is the unfolding of life, a new form, a new set of conditions, rising from the old ones. It's like looking at a river in the morning, and again in the evening. It seems like the same river, but the water has changed. The flow continues. That's how life moves too. Some people might feel uneasy hearing this. They might ask, if there's no person being born, does my life even matter? That's a fair question. But here's the thing. The value of life isn't in being permanent. It's in how we live right now, in the kindness we show, in the choices we make, in the peace we bring to others. The Buddha didn't want us to chase ideas about souls or spirits. He wanted us to understand life clearly and to live it wisely. So yes, something is born, but it's not a self. It's a new moment in the great unfolding of life. And that brings us to another important question. If there's no fixed self and no one who is truly born, then what happens at the end of life? What does death really mean? We'll talk about that next. Section 3. If no one is born, what actually dies? Now that we've looked at what it really means to be born, we're ready to face the next big question. What does it mean to die? And this one touches a very tender place in the heart. Even when we understand that there is no fixed self, even when we know that life is a flowing process, the idea of death can still feel very personal. There's often a quiet fear in the background. What will happen to me when I die? Will I just disappear? Will I be forgotten? Let's be honest. That fear isn't always about the moment of death itself. It's often about being erased, being unseen. The idea that everything we've lived, everything we've loved, will be wiped away. So we try to leave something behind. We build up our names, our work, our families. We want to be remembered. We want to matter. But the Buddha gently invited us to look deeper. He didn't say that death is just a big black hole, and he didn't say that a little soul floats off into eternity either. He warned us not to fall into either extreme, not into the idea of total disappearance, and not into the idea of an eternal self. So what did he say? He said that death is the natural dissolving of the temporary arrangement we called a person. That's all. The body stops. The breath ends. The five aggregates, the parts that made up our experience, fall apart. It's not that something vanishes into nothing. It's that the shape we were holding no longer holds. But here's the beautiful part. Just because the form ends doesn't mean the impact ends. Just like when a flower fades, its scent might still be in the room. When someone's voice grows quiet, the echo might still be heard. And when a person dies, the ripple of their kindness, their choices, their presence, it still moves through the world. Not as a soul with a name, but as life continuing. Think of it like this. When we light a candle and it burns softly in the evening, it gives light, it gives warmth, and then eventually the flame goes out. But that warmth, maybe it helped someone see, maybe it brought comfort. The flame is gone, but it mattered. In the same way, our life is not about lasting forever. It's about how we lived while we were here. The Buddha taught us that what dies is not a someone who owned life. What dies is a temporary formation, something that arose from conditions and then, naturally, returns to the flow. And this can be a very healing truth. We don't have to be afraid of death taking away something we never truly had. The self we try to protect was never fixed. It was always changing, always shared with others, always dependent on causes we couldn't fully control. And that's okay. That's part of the wonder of life. We weren't meant to hold on to it like a possession. We were meant to participate in it, to touch others through it, and then let it move on. So what happens after we die? Life continues, karma continues, the ripple of what we've done, the energy of how we've lived, it goes forward. Not as me, not as mine, but as part of the great ongoing dance of causes and conditions. And when we can see death this way, not as a cliff, not as a tragedy, but as a natural release, something softens in the heart. We no longer have to fear being forgotten. We can trust that what we offered, even in small ways, is carried on. And so birth and death are not two separate things. They are just two movements of the same wave, which leads us to a subtle but important warning, something the Buddha knew we all needed to hear. Because even after hearing all this, there's one little trick the mind can still play. Let's talk about that next. Section 4. The ego that understands no self is still the ego. Now here's something we need to be careful with. After hearing about no self, about how nothing is permanent, and how life flows like a river, some people start to feel they understand. And that's good. It means something has opened. But it's also where a small, quiet danger can slip in. The ego comes back. It doesn't come loudly this time. It comes quietly. In fact, it hides inside our understanding. You may have noticed it before. Someone hears the teaching of no self and says, "Ah, I get it. There's no one here. No one is born. No one dies. They sound peaceful, maybe even wise. But sometimes behind that peaceful voice, there's a new identity being built. Not I am important, but I am the one who understands. Not I am special, but I am beyond the self. You see, the ego is very clever. It will wear any clothing just to survive. It can be the victim. It can be the achiever. And yes, it can even pretend to be the awakened one. It says, look how spiritual I am. It says, I know something others don't. It feels pleased when people notice how calm or deep we've become. Or maybe it gets slightly irritated when others just don't get it yet. It may not speak out loud. It may not even show on your face, but inside, it's quietly building a new story. The story of the one who has seen through the self. That, too, is still a self. The Buddha warned us about this very thing. Real wisdom isn't about collecting the right answers. It's not about winning a debate or sounding enlightened. It's not even about saying there is no self. It's about a heart that no longer needs to defend anything. Real understanding feels soft, not proud, open, not closed. It's not in a rush to be right. It doesn't need to explain itself. It doesn't need to be seen. It's like water, gentle, steady, and clear. So how do we know if the ego is sneaking back in? We notice when we feel the need to prove something, when we feel better than others, when we feel annoyed that people don't understand what we do, when we feel secretly proud of how humble we are. These are little signs that the old I has found a new disguise. But the solution is not to scold ourselves or feel guilty. That's just more ego. The practice is simple. We see it. We notice it kindly, honestly, and we smile. Maybe even laugh a little. Oh, look, the self is trying again. And we let it go. Because the path isn't about building the perfect view. It's about learning to see clearly, moment by moment, how the self keeps coming back. And each time we see it without clinging, without fear, something softens. That's how the ego slowly loses its grip, not by force, but by gentle awareness. So yes, even the one who says there is no self can be just another mask. And that's okay. We're human. The mind is always trying to find ground to stand on. But when we can stand in not knowing, when we don't need to be right, when we don't need to be seen, then something truly peaceful begins to grow. So if there's no fixed self, and even our understanding isn't something to hold tightly, how then should we live? Let's turn to that now. Section 5, so how should we live? We've come a long way together. We've looked deeply at what the Buddha meant when he said there is no permanent self. We've seen that birth is not the arrival of someone, and death is not the disappearance of someone. We've even seen how the ego can sneak back in through our own spiritual understanding. So now the question becomes very real, very personal. If there is no fixed self to protect, no permanent me to hold on to, then how should we live? That's not a trick question. It's the most important one. You see, many people think that if there's no self, then nothing matters, that we can just float through life or ignore responsibility. But that's not what the Buddha taught. He didn't teach no self to make us careless. He taught it so we could be free, free from fear, from pressure, from clinging. Because when we stop clinging to a fixed identity, life becomes lighter. There's less to protect, less to defend. And in that space, something beautiful can grow. Let's take an example. Think of how often we say when I'm angry. That sounds simple, but if you look closely, that sentence has a hidden meaning. I am the anger. I am the one being threatened. But what if instead we simply said, anger is here? That small change makes a big difference. It shows us that the anger is a passing condition. It doesn't belong to a fixed me. It's something we can observe, breathe with, and allow to pass without letting it take over. The same goes for fear, sadness, frustration, even joy. These things are real, yes, but they are not you. They are not permanent. They don't have to control your story. And when we see that, we don't have to react so quickly. We don't have to speak from hurt. We don't have to defend something that was never truly ours to begin with. We become more patient, more kind, more clear. Even our love becomes deeper because we're no longer loving from a place of you belong to me or this love proves who I am. We're simply letting love move through us, not as something to hold on to, but as something to give, to share. Compassion also grows, not because we're trying to be good people, but because the walls between me and you are not so thick anymore. We start to see others not as separate beings to compare ourselves with, but as part of this same flow of life, just like us, changing, aging, hoping, hurting, learning. And no, this doesn't mean life becomes perfect. You'll still forget. The self will still sneak in. You'll still want to be right sometimes. That's okay. The practice is simply this: notice, soften, let go. Not as a rule, but as a way of being present. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to build a better version of you. You just need to live with openness and honesty. Let life flow through you, like wind through a tree, strong but not stiff, grounded but not stuck. The Buddha wasn't asking us to escape the world. He was showing us how to live fully in it, without being trapped by the stories we tell ourselves. So how should we live? With clarity, with compassion, with less fear and more space in the heart. And maybe most of all, with the quiet understanding that this life was never something to possess. It was always something to participate in, to care, to learn, to love, and then to let go. That is the way of freedom. And that is where our journey begins again, in every moment. Conclusion: a life without holding so tightly. We've walked through some deep waters together today. We've looked closely at the nature of the self, at birth, at death, at the quiet tricks of the ego, and at what it truly means to live freely. And maybe now we can sit with a bit more peace, not because we've solved every mystery, but because we've learned to hold the mystery with gentler hands. If there's one thing to remember, it's this: the self we cling to, the I we try to protect, is not something solid. It was never meant to be a possession. It's like a wave on the ocean, real, moving, but not separate from everything else. And when we see that, something begins to shift. We don't have to carry the heavy burden of always proving ourselves. We don't have to win every argument. We don't have to be afraid of change. We don't have to make life fit into a perfect little story. We can just be here, alive, aware, open. When we stop holding so tightly to me, we make more room for others, for compassion, for listening, for kindness without expectation, for love without fear. We begin to live not for ourselves alone, but as part of something larger, a flow that has no beginning and no end, a life that isn't owned, but shared. And when death comes, as it surely will, we can meet it with the same gentleness, not as a thief taking something from us, but as a return, a soft return to the flow we came from, like a leaf falling back to the earth, like a wave returning to the sea. None of us know how many days we have left, but we do know this one is here, this breath, this moment, and that is enough. So let's live it well. Let's be a little more patient with ourselves. Let's be a little softer with others. Let's not rush to hold on, and let's not be afraid to let go. The Buddha didn't give us beliefs to memorize. He gave us a mirror to look into our own lives and see clearly. And what we find in that mirror is not emptiness, not nothingness, but a kind of quiet freedom, a peace that doesn't come from controlling life, but from flowing with it. That's the gift of no self, not fear, not loss, but lightness, honesty, and peace. Thank you for walking this path with me today. May you live with ease. May you be free from fear. And may you touch the world with the softness of a heart that no longer needs to hold. Let's carry that with us now, as we return to our day, not as a theory, but as a way of being, moment by moment, breath by breath,